Spotlight is proudly sponsored by HEC Media, St. Louis's home for arts, education, and culture.
Today on Spotlight, the fascinating story behind the creation of the Nuremberg as we dive into its history. Plus, cutting-edge training for surgeons using a St. Louis startup's cadaver technology. And then how a set designer creates at the Muny as we approach its 107th season. But first, Opera Theater celebrates a milestone anniversary, the changes that could be on the way. It's Sunday, and you're watching the multiple Emmy Award-winning Spotlight.
Long before the first notes are sung, the sound of the sewing machine signals the coming of another festival season for Opera Theater of St. Louis. But the 2025 season is special because it is Opera Theater's 50th. And the new season includes a nostalgic homage to its first season.
Don Pasquale was the opera on the opening night of Opera Theater of St. Louis's first season in 1976. Truly a full circle moment.
The story of Opera Theater of St. Louis could be an opera itself, full of twists and turns and triumphs.
Opera Theater of St. Louis should not have been a success. A number of attempts to launch an opera company in St. Louis had failed, some quite spectacularly so. But in 1975, some of our civic leaders came together and decided that we really should start an opera company in St. Louis. Going into opening night in 1976, ticket sales were poor. People had a raised eyebrow. What's going on in Webster Groves? On that opening night, something special happened. And by the end of the first performance, those who were in the room say they knew that something was born and something remarkable was happening. And thousands of performances later, 50 years, here we are.
And throughout its history, two things have made the Opera Theater experience unique: the garden gatherings before and after the show, and the unwavering commitment to performing every opera in English.
I have to admit that when I came to Opera Theater, I thought I might want to change that tradition. I thought I might put my thumbprint on the company by abandoning or maybe reducing that language policy. But then I began attending performances. I'll never forget, in my first season, 2019, we did a wonderful production of The Marriage of Figaro. Great cast, beautiful sets and costumes. But the best part, the audience laughed in the right places. You could feel that the room understood the gag. They say there's no zealot like a convert, and indeed I am deeply converted to this idea that we must do everything we can do to make opera accessible to our audience. And so the English language policy is here to stay.
Opera Theater of St. Louis has also distinguished itself by presenting new work, including 27 American premieres and 45 world premieres, often featuring young artists, another hallmark of Opera Theater.
Our audience, for years, has gone on that journey with us, embracing, seeking avant-garde, different, new U.S. premieres, world premieres, stories that are not common to the opera canon, stories that sometimes are difficult, challenging, things that might not be so easy to talk about. Our audience has sought that out. One of my favorite moments is when people ask me if I have a full-time job or if my staff works throughout the year. The answer is yes. Our education programs reach nearly 100,000 students a year, actually in 50 states and a dozen countries. Throughout the year, we are bringing opera and art and connection into this community.
And that brings us to this, the soon-to-be-vacant 9-acre Calaris Company headquarters in Clayton, which may soon be Opera Theater's new home.
The Loretto Hilton's a great theater. It's a great space, but it was never designed to do what an opera company needs it to do. And so we've been talking off and on for our entire history about needing a home bespoke to what we need it to do. But the vision is so much more than that. The vision is not just of a new opera house for us. It's of a new performing arts center that will really serve the broader St. Louis arts community, not only activated during our festival season, but vibrant throughout the year. And of course, even as we contemplate a new home that does things that we could not previously have imagined, we're not going to change who we are. And so at the center of whatever we do will be a garden, and will be tents, and we'll be picnicking at Opera Theater for decades to come, because some traditions just can't and won't change. There's never been a more challenging time to produce opera in this country, but there's also never been a more exciting time to be part of the arts in this country and to be part of bringing our community together through artistic expression. For everyone who's excited about where we've been, I say we're just getting started.
For more St. Louis stories, subscribe to the HEC YouTube channel. Spotlight STL from HEC Media. History Spotlight, brought to you by HEC Media and the Missouri Historical Society.
Hello, I'm Dr. Jody Saville, President of the Missouri Historical Society in St. Louis, and this is History Spotlight. The Nuremberg Chronicle is a famous early printed book filled with woodcut illustrations and text that spans the history of the world. Acquisitions librarian Kelly Brown shares some of the fascinating stories found in the Missouri Historical Society's unaltered copy.
Popularly known as the Nuremberg Chronicle, Liber Chronicarum, or Latin for the Book of Chronicles, is a history of the world including biblical material from creation to the Last Judgment, with legends and historical material in between. This is a famous early printed book, or incunabulum, derived from the Latin word for cradle, identifying a work that had been created in the infancy of Western printing. Originally printed in Latin in 1493 at Anton Koberger's print shop, the Nuremberg Chronicle is prized for its masterful layout of woodcut images and text. A second edition, produced in German, made the book accessible to a wider audience. One of the stories in the book is that of Pope Joan. She was said to have been a woman in the Middle Ages who had disguised herself and risen through the priesthood until she was elected pope. Later, during the Protestant Reformation, many Catholics took the legend as an insult, even going as far to edit, cover up, or cut out the image from their copy of the Nuremberg Chronicle. The Missouri Historical Society's copy is unaltered, so we can conclude that the former owners were not offended. The Nuremberg Chronicle's author, Hartmann Schiedel, was a scholar who compiled the work from information in his personal library. Artists Michael Vogelmann and Wilhelm Leidenberg developed the layouts and oversaw the art. The book is filled with more than 1,800 woodcut illustrations made from 645 card wood blocks that portray saints, clergy, royalty, cities, maps, animals, and monsters. For an additional cost, buyers could add color to the images and have hand-decorated letters added, known as rubrication. While Missouri Historical Society's copy does not have color added to its images, an initial letter has been added to the book by hand. Of nearly 1,500 original copies, scholars estimate that fewer than 400 Latin editions exist today. One of these copies can now be seen and collected at the Missouri History Museum. St. Louis has a long history with the print tradition. Although print technology has advanced since the time of the Nuremberg Chronicle, many of the fundamentals remained very similar until the digital age. The earliest newspaper west of the Mississippi, the Missouri Gazette, was published in 1808 in St. Louis by Joseph Charles using a press and type from the East. In 1840, the St. Louis Type Foundry was established, allowing St. Louis publications to be made with locally cast type. Over time, St. Louis became home to many more nationally known type foundries, such as Central and Inland, until their numbers dwindled due to industry consolidation and changes in demand due to newer printing technologies. Today's St. Louis supports many enthusiast and artisanal print shops that practice traditional printing techniques.
Next week on History Spotlight, one of St. Louis's renowned blues artists, possibly holding the record for the longest blues career in history.
To learn more about the Missouri Historical Society, visit mohistory.org.
HEC Media. Recognized, celebrated, honored time and again for excellence in the industry. HEC Media has been bringing home the hardware for over a decade. Arts and education to author talks, magazine shows and documentaries, individual craft achievements to overall excellence. Find all of the award-winning content at hecmedia.org.
Having the appearance of a military field hospital, every second would matter at the surgeon's table, except in this case, the precious minutes spent here are critically important for different reasons. That's because the human bodies on the table are not alive, even though they bleed and respond in ways as if they are.
We have the ability that no one else really in the world has, and that's the ability to bring a cadaver back to lifelike.
MaxFi's CEO, Bob Mills, says the company's cadaver technology makes the surgical simulation seem so real. The pumping system helps blood course through their veins. It brings the blood up to the temperature of a living human with a restored vascular system.
In vivo PC. So once we connect that cadaver up to our reservoir system, heat exchanger, and pump, and start circulating, and that's when you have a heartbeat, the temperature comes back to that of a live human, and then we also then have the tactile feel, so when the surgeon cuts into the tissue, it's as though he is cutting into a live patient.
MaxFi research and development engineer Yuri Snyder explains just how the perfusion cadaver system can replicate live tissue responses.
This system acts like the heart. That pump acts like a heart would. You would see that pulsatile effect in the vessels on the cadaver. We can even measure estimated blood loss. We fill the reservoir with our various blood products, a blood product that can actually clot like real blood would.
The technology is made possible by founder and chief medical officer Dr. Joss Fernandez in Columbia, Missouri.
Cardiovascular and vascular surgeon down at Boone Health Center down in Columbia, Missouri. He started this company. We use a substance that Josh invented called in vivo light. That not only preserves the circulatory system, it restores it as well.
He says researchers, universities, surgeons, and device makers benefit from the technology.
So when they're developing a product, and we've done this several times, they thought they were ready to go to human trials, their product did not work. It had a design flaw. If they will work with this earlier in the development process, we could save them literally millions of dollars of development time. If it doesn't work, they can try it again, no one has gotten hurt.
MaxFi has many partners. This year, the company built this very new surgical simulation lab in St. Louis County. It's the only medical training center for surgeons using reanimated cadaver technology.
So physicians can practice surgery, medical device companies can build better products. We can train physicians how to use these products.
MaxFi is also playing a vital role improving battlefield skills through military trauma training.
We do a lot of work with the special forces in training their medics. We put on labs in places like Hawaii. One was just put on in Alaska.
And something new, Snyder helped the company develop a technology that mimics cardiac functions. It's an actual human heart that beats in a box.
In vivo core, we developed this specifically for doing structural heart testing. So devices like heart valves, heart pumps, stents, things that are deployed internally in the heart can be done in this system. So the heart inside this box actually beats just like a normal heart would.
Snyder devoted long hours to make this product a success.
I built this box myself by hand. What's unique about this technology is we use fluid pressure, so we direct the flow of fluid so that it compresses the heart, where other models typically wrap the heart in some sort of material, and all that friction wears that heart down and breaks it down. So this is a really low stress way to get a heartbeat without completely compromising the tissue, and that's why we built it the way we did, completely suspended in this fluid.
The company says all MaxFi technologies can improve proficiency and skills and the ability to save lives.
One of the things we're having to overcome is people, when they hear perfused cadavers, they have bad memories of a cadaver, and we need to get them over that to learn that what we provide is realism.
For original programming and award-winning content, explore hecmedia.org. Find all of your favorite genres, including the arts and sciences. Go in-depth with the latest research. Get insight into new technologies. Learn about breakthrough discoveries. Find it all in one place. Explore hecmedia.org.
Last season at the Muny, video took center stage in a bold new way for Anything Goes. See how cutting-edge LED screens are transforming traditional set design.
I'm a video designer, the visual element of video and projections in some way on stage. We are kind of a blend between lighting and scenic in a way. The scenic designer kind of works with the director and sets the general tone and style of the show. And then we take all of that information and we kind of create different imagery that fits into that world and kind of, works with that world in some way, shape, or form. Sometimes I'm picturing things that happen over all of the screens together, and sometimes it'll be just one screen or just the other screen. It definitely depends on what the scenery and what the action on stage is. The director and we've already had, I think, 5 or 6 multi-hour meetings, just going through and talking through what we expect each scene to have or do, or, what we want to see on the walls. That's when we get into the studio and I have a full group of people who are here helping, create this team. It's just like the people who build the sets, they are here, and so within those last 2 weeks, we all push together and get all of that content out and ready to go. So this is the storyboard version of it, which is all of the pieces together with the clouds behind it and the textures and things like that. And so, you can actually see the full animation. There's a lot of going through each scene and deciding what are the important pieces to that scene. And then there's also the puzzle pieces of figuring out how to get all of the imagery to cue the way we want to. Because, images come up and down in different scenes and they animate in and out. And so figuring out all of those puzzle pieces together and how they go across the 3 screens it's tricky. It's the collaboration between the people, but it's also the most fun part of the job, is, again, I'm so reactionary towards every other design element, and figuring that all out is just difficult, especially when there's so many moving parts every single time. You've got scenery that's moving on and off stage, you've got lights that are fading in and out and things like that and changing color, and having to react to all of it and move in and out. And sometimes, there's video shoots, film shoots where we have to figure out what the costumes are doing and make sure that our content works with those costumes and things like that. That's the hardest part. It's just tracking it all. But again, the most fun part. That's the reason that I'm doing theater and I'm not just a visual artist, Because I could pretty easily put together a very beautiful composition and hang it on a wall and be done. But that's not fun to me, It's so much more fun when you get to have everyone bring the best things to the table and then have it shine in that way.
The Muny has been awarded the 2025 Regional Theater Tony Award, honoring its century-long impact on American theater and artistic excellence. Discover the story in HEC Media's exclusive documentary, The Best of Us, 100 Years of Muny Magic.
It's the oldest and largest outdoor theater in the country. The Muny has been making magic for 100 years.
The seats seem to go on for miles.
When that audience claps and it's a full house, there's nothing like it.
The Muny is totally unique.
No one does 7 shows in 8 weeks. That's an insane schedule.
Every element is created here. The costumes, the scenery, the makeup, the props.
Mammoth Productions, 11 days of rehearsal, St. Louis, outdoor, summer theater. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any logical sense.
But that is precisely when and where it happens.
Big, giant, magical feast of incredible Muny magic.
Dozens of interviews tell the story of the Muny's incredible milestone.
It's ours, it's St. Louis's, it's a part of our life. It absolutely represents the best of us.
The Best of Us, 100 seasons of Muny magic.
You can find the stories featured in today's show along with past episodes and more at hecmedia.org/spotlight.
In a world full of memorials to battles won, there are also monuments to loves lost. Arguably, the most famous on the love side of the ledger is the Taj Mahal in India, a magnificent mausoleum built by an emperor for his favorite wife. But there is another tomb built by a husband for his wife that is revered by architects from around the world, but you don't have to leave the country to see it. In fact, you don't even have to leave the city.
This was on the National Register of Historic Places decades and decades before the cemetery was itself.
This impressive tomb in St. Louis's Bellefontaine Cemetery was commissioned in 1891 by a beer baron whose brand name is no longer familiar, but whose family name is still well known because of another famous structure he had built. The Wainwright Building in downtown St. Louis was commissioned in 1890 by Ellis Wainwright. But before it was finished, his wife Charlotte died suddenly at the age of 34. This limestone and marble tomb is how Ellis Wainwright chose to honor the memory of his great lost love.
I used to teach art history, and art historians consider it possibly the most beautiful piece of tomb architecture in the United States.
The Wainwright Mausoleum and the Wainwright Building have more in common than just the name. Both were designed by architect Louis Sullivan, considered the father of modernism, who also originated the maxim, form follows function.
He has beautiful ornamentation, but it's the purity of form. It's a perfect half sphere on top of a perfect cube. It's geometry, and it's very regular geometry. These aren't rectangles. These aren't oblongs, ellipses. It's things with equal dimensions.
And yet, for all of Sullivan's decorative detail, there is something missing on the Wainwright tomb: the Wainwright name.
It's the only mausoleum in the cemetery that does not have a name. And the reason is, Ellis Wainwright, when it came time for him to ask Louis Sullivan about a name, he was told the one-word answer, and that's no. It will not have a name on it because it would diminish the architectural style. You know, this will be known and recognized as the Wainwright Mausoleum because of the amazing architecture.
The Wainwright tomb is surrounded by other magnificent mausoleums. After all, it sits atop a hill in the area of Bellefontaine Cemetery known as Millionaire's Row.
Well, at the time, it was the most prominent cemetery in St. Louis, and in my opinion, it still is. You know?
Several of the most spectacular monuments belong to other beer brewing families, including the Lemps, who built this majestic mausoleum directly and deliberately across from the Wainwrights.
When they built their mausoleum, because they were business rivals, they were brewers of German beer, they built it across the street and made it taller to take away the Wainwrights' view of the river.
Architecture professors will bring students up here Architects will fly in from out of town from any part of the country just to see the structure.
He did this for her.
The Wainwright tomb has become such a popular attraction for everyday visitors. Bellefontaine includes it in 2 different tours. And taking those tours is the only way visitors can get inside to see the marble and mosaic artistry that begins on the floor and travels all the way to the ceiling. Ellis Wainwright died 33 years after Charlotte, and he's buried here too. And between her death and his, he led a remarkable life, as recounted in Carol Faring Shepley's book about the famous and infamous residents of Bellefontaine, with Ellis Wainwright falling into the scalawag column for alleged misdeeds on a scale big enough to land him in the pages of another book, Lincoln Steffen's famous expose, The Shame of the Cities.
He decided that he wanted the rights to the public transportation, the trolley line, and to get it, he signed a bribe for $135,000. Fortunately for him, when the indictments came down, he was traveling in Egypt. He came back to St. Louis when the chief witness died, and he said, "It's great to be back in the best town in the United States," and then he immediately decamped for Park Avenue in New York.
No one is sure how much it cost to build the Wainwright tomb, but it must have been a lot considering it took 2 years to construct and was designed by the most famous American architect of his time, whose draftsman would become one of the most famous architects of his time, Frank Lloyd Wright, who later claimed some of the Wainwright tomb was his design. There are no direct descendants of the Wainwrights to watch over the tomb, but an endowment pays for Bellefontaine to take care of it. They recently gave it a good scrubbing. Samuel Wainwright, Ellis's father, who started the brewery that made his son rich enough to be buried in a mausoleum, is also buried at Bellefontaine, but in a more traditional family plot in a different part of the cemetery. Ellis and Charlotte were the only Wainwrights to make it up the hill to Millionaire's Row, where despite their short lives together, they are united in splendor for eternity.
The architecture is beyond St. Louis, and we are blessed to have this here. It's very unique, and it is a one-of-a-kind.
For more information on tours and upcoming events, go to bellefontainecemetery.org. Next week, what a new mural adds to the beauty of the local landscape in Alton. Plus, a rockumentary exploring the electrifying classic rock scene in St. Louis. Thanks for watching Spotlight. Join us next Sunday at 9:30 a.m. on KPLR 11.